sandwiches, ice cream, coffee and snacks, and many other pleasing treats. Our foods are fresh and tasty, our drinks satisfying and refreshing. They're so good.
Welcome to Average Joe's Drive-In.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 73 of Average Joe's Drive-In. I am your host, TJ Washburn, and with me this week is author Chris Philbrook. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
How is the weather down in your area today?
Well, the afternoon is about a 180 from this morning. This morning was drab and dreary and cold, and now it's like 72 and sunny and beautiful.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same thing up here. It's been miserable all day, and then this afternoon, the sun poked out. There's a little bit of a breeze, so everything's drying up, and it's turned out to be beautiful.
Yeah.
It's been kind of a weird summer, though, you know. It's been, at least up here, I don't know where exactly you are out of, but I'm out of Maine, northern Maine, so it's been kind of funky up here this year. It's been kind of cool, really.
Yeah, when you say up here, you mean up here, if you're in northern Maine.
Well, yeah, up here, yeah. Well, I'm actually more central than northern, but I just say northern because most people consider anything north of Bangor northern, so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So,
we got, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so, yeah, why don't you just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do and, you know, some projects you've got going on and that sort of thing, so everybody gets to know you a little bit.
Cool. Well, I'm Chris Philbrook. I live in southwestern New Hampshire, in the stronghold of Cheshire County. My wife and two daughters and I live here. We've been here for a few years now. I'm a writer by trade. That's what I do for a day job now. I got my start writing a post-apocalyptic blog, which I was just writing for fun for a friend of mine. And we wound up picking up quite a few online readers and, you know, migrated to some pretty gigantic numbers on a daily basis, and then caught the attention of a publisher and wound up getting published and turned it into an 8-book series that's pretty popular right now. And a couple more.
That's quite impressive. I have a hard time getting like one book out most of the time, let alone an 8-book series. So. How long has that been going on? How long have you been doing that series for now?
Well, I first started writing it in the summer of 2010, and it was written in real time. So as I wrote it, the dates that I was writing it were in the book as the dates that the events were happening.
Oh, wow.
And it was basically a self-imposed deadline just to make sure that I was, keeping at it. But I wrote full-time on that for about 2 years. And that 8-book story is something like 1.5 million words. And then when we transitioned to publishing it, I had, almost 2 years where I was just putting out those for books, and I had the time to write a high fantasy, dark fantasy trilogy, a steampunk kind of story. And then I launched my urban fantasy series, which is now 3 books out, and I'm writing the 4th now. And now I'm returning to my post-apocalyptic world. I have a few more books coming out in the original series.
So how has the transition been going from, kind of back and forth between those, now that you're going back to the that original 8-book series? Is that kind of a little bit of one of those things where you've got to get back into the pace of what you're doing with that and get out of that mindset? Or is it one of those things that's like it's like an old friend you haven't seen for a while, and bam, you're just right back into it.
I ran screaming when I was done with that series, when I wrote the original The End on what was book 8, because I had been writing one story constantly every day for 2 years, and it had completely consumed all of my free time. It had, I was dealing with people on the website, so when I finally wrote The End, I was so excited. And I wanted to talk about anything. I wanted to talk about toasters. I wanted to talk about the weather, So in the 4 or 5 years, since I put the cap on that, I got to experiment with a bunch of new characters, created a couple new series, wrote a few more books, and, kind of built up new ideas for those old characters. So, now I'm coming back to it, and I see all these great ideas that I can add to the world and new experiences that the character can experience, but it is shifting gears. You know, it's a different style of writing, it's a different setting, it's different rules, it's a different kind of challenge going back home, you know.
Oh yeah, but it comes out as almost one of those absence makes the heart fonder things. Mm-hmm. But I know personally, like my first book, The Returners, I've had a lot of people ask me about writing a sequel to that, or another book in the series, even if it's a prequel, and it's like, I wrote that book 6 years ago now, so right. It's like, I was like, I don't know, I'm in a whole different space from when I wrote that, and I don't know if I could really catch that same tone going back after that long of a time, you know? It's kind of one of those weird things.
Yeah, it's like matching paints.
Oh yeah, without any sort of a color guide, you're just you're going by line of sight and trying to remember everything.
Yeah, I keep really meticulous notes. I've got, spreadsheets and documents with all this information and try to keep all of my data, relevant. So when I was going back to it, I was able to do what was this person's, plan for the next couple of years? What was this character going to do? Blah, blah, blah. The only way to get that is to read it.
Right. As I've said on the show a bunch of different times when I've taught to guests, is I am terrible at keeping meticulous notes. I write general outlines, and I will, as I do characters, I'll write some basic character synopsis down, but I don't really dive into it to an extent of I can just go back and look at those notes and know exactly everything about that character that I need to know. I kind of have to refresh myself by either rereading what I wrote, or it tends to be too much of a process with me, and I'm such a train of thought writer that's really difficult for me to do.
I had to go back and reread 8 books.
That's a lot.
I had to start at the beginning and follow it all the way through and see, how it twisted and turned and how my motivations back then were changing and how I was, reacting to the feedback I was getting. And, now here I am several years later, a totally different writer. And, I wasn't a dad when I was writing those books, but now I have 2 daughters. So, that changes you. It's just, it's definitely a challenge.
Oh, yeah. Your life experience, I think with any writer, whether it directly goes into your books or not, I think life experience and, those experiences do influence what you write in some way and how you perceive different things and just, that general sort of thing in that way. And I don't care what anybody says. I think it's almost impossible to not have those things influence your writing.
I agree. We're just filters, We see the world the way we see it, and then it filters through us and comes out in the writing.
And that's one thing, as a genre writer, that is one thing that I've always loved, because you can take those things around you that you're observing and put them in a completely different type of setting, where you're able to try to figure things out, and it makes the story more engaging. I know personally the stories that I really enjoy and like myself are the ones that are engaging and do ask you questions and make you think a little bit, and the what ifs, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, any book or movie where you can have your perspective on something challenged is powerful stuff. I always go back to a movie like American History X, where, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but, Ed Norton's character is a racist. And it's just frightening, because if you're watching a character's perspective shift and you can buy into why they become a hateful person, that's crazy powerful stuff.
Yeah, that is just a tough movie. For me, that's just such a hard movie to watch. It's a good movie, and I like it, but I've only seen it, I think I've seen it twice. And it's just one of those movies because it's so powerful. and it asks so many questions that it's so difficult to get through. That's not I'm one of these people that I like to escape all the negatives, that are around you in the real world and go to the fantastical fun places, or even, into the horror world where things are brutal and violent, but in a different way because it's not real, something fantastical. There's that fantasy element to it.
Right, yeah. I mean, you have to suspend, your disbelief. If it's too rooted in reality, it's just too real.
Oh, for sure. That takes my enjoyment completely out of the picture. There are times when I love biographies and stuff like that, but I never could get into the true crime stuff or that sort of thing that's based on, just really horrific real events. That's not my thing.
Yep. Yeah, it's heavy duty stuff.
So, as a writer, who are some of the authors that really, influenced you and made you want to start writing?
As far as, I've always been a writer, so, everybody that I've read going back to when I was a little kid has influenced me in some way. The people that I really, wish I wrote like, I'm a big Neil Gaiman fan. I just adore the way he builds worlds. His, modern take on sort of fairy tale aspects I just find fascinating. In the horror genre, I love Clive Barker. Anybody my age in America loves Stephen King if you're into horror because he's just ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I'm a big gamer going back, from, being a kid. So, when I was, 13, I was, running my own Dungeons and Dragons games and we played all the week. So
hell yeah.
I read a ton of fantasy novels.
Everything Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman put out, pretty much everything R.A. Salvatore put out. I'm a huge fan of the Dragonlance books and the Forgotten Realms series and, Canonical and Sojourn and all those books are some of my all-time favorites. And yeah.
Yep. I got them all in the office that I'm talking in right now.
I was also really big into Shadowrun when I was younger.
Yeah, me too.
We used to play a lot of Shadowrun, and so I really enjoyed the Shadowrun books. I thought most of them were very well done for the most part as well.
Yeah. It's such a great world. When I worked as a game developer for a few years before I started writing, and one of the product lines that I worked on was Shadowrun.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was great. Mike Mulvihill was the developer for several years, and he was my boss, and I got to help on that a little bit, which was really fun.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, it's one of those things as I've gotten older, I find I haven't gamed regularly now in probably been 7 or 8 years since the gaming thing kind of went on the back burner because I just didn't have time. When I started doing band stuff and was traveling a lot and playing shows, being able to schedule a regular game night became very difficult. So
yeah,
it kind of went on the back burner for me, probably 15 years ago. But then, I still was able to game here and there. But it's been a while. And I've actually been talking to a few people that live close by to me that I've never gamed with, but they game, and they're kind of in the same boat as me. So we were talking about doing some old man gaming, where we can game for a few hours here and there, and kind of, those 12.
My wife and I have a Facebook group.
Oh, very cool.
That we get together with there's about 40 people in the group right now, and it's all of our gaming friends that we've known for years, and we run a monthly Saturday game day.
Oh, cool.
And we just run whatever, people show up, and it's kind of rotating because everyone's lives are so busy once you get to a certain age, especially when you have kids or a couple jobs or you're going to school or whatever. So being able to integrate that back into my adult life, now that we have a home and a property and a big dining room and we can actually entertain 10 people at the house, it's been amazing.
Oh, I bet. I was talking to my friend Justin, and he's like, yeah, I've been working on the Forgotten Realms campaign for a while, and I just, I'm like, dude, I really want to get back into gaming. I said, I miss it. I miss the camaraderie of just sitting around, you know, and we always spent, I don't know about how your game sessions go, but I know a lot of times with us, we spent more time hanging out and just chatting than we did gaming most of the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, if we got 3 hours of actual gaming in out of like an 8-hour session, we were lucky most of the time.
Yeah, my wife doesn't understand, like, she'll be like, well, when are you guys going to start? Oh, we'll start about noon. Well, when are you going to go? Well, until we're done.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, when's that? Well, I don't know, 8, 9? She's like, how could you possibly sit around a table for 8 or 9 hours? Well, you know, about 3 hours of that is just us BSing.
No, catching up
and then,
with
you know,
everybody.
we have to break the food. Right, and then we have to recap the last game session because some of the people missed it, and the next thing you know, we've only been playing for the length of maybe a long movie.
Right.
But it's such an interesting hobby when people who don't role play visit, you know, a table of role players and they see the game happening. It's not the experience that people think it is.
No, it's not. It's very. I always attribute it's a very communal experience. Is how I always thought of it. You know.
Yeah, I describe it as collaborative storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's a play that only one person, you know, controls the story of, but each person knows the script to one character.
Right.
So you kind of, you know, improvise it on the fly. You have a loose idea where it's going. Everyone knows how to act in character, and then you just kind of see what happens.
It's a very interesting way of doing things, and I think that really translates into being a writer and thinking maybe outside of your own perspective of things, because you're trying to anticipate what different characters are going to do in your head to create that world. It's you know, I think it really helps develop your storytelling ability, especially if you're like a DM or a GM, and you have to be able to adapt to what your characters are doing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be half the writer that I am if I hadn't have been a player and a DM, you know, my entire life.
Now, one of my best friends was one of the most amazing DMs I've ever had, and he could create a story out of nothing on the fly, and no matter what you did, he was able to integrate what he wanted to into the story seamlessly and adjust and adapt based on character actions. And I was like, I really wish he had written, you know, more like stories and stuff, because I think he would be a phenomenal writer, and he's never done it. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely a skill set. It's something that the improvisation factor of it is crazy. Like I've been accused of being a good improv DM, and I know when I'm writing, I treat, you know, the plot twists that come up in a story the same way I do, you know, a character acting off script.
Right.
You know, in a game, it's like, oh wait, okay, I wasn't prepared for that. How can I shoehorn what I was prepared for into what they're doing so it feels organic? And, you know, after a few seconds of checking my notes, or, you know, someone goes to the potty, you know, you have the idea where you want to go with it, and the next thing you know, it feels organic, and it was fun, and everyone has a good time, and you look like you're a genius. Yeah, that's just one of those. It's a special ability for somebody that can do that. I've always said I was never a good GM. I could always come up with a good story, but the on-the-fly stuff used to really throw me for a loop, because it would take me a while to kind of figure out where I wanted to go, and by the time I got to that point, they would do something else crazy and throw me completely off. So, you know, because that's what they do. They're there to make the GM's life miserable. I couldn't even tell you how many times I've either ran or played in a campaign that was completely and utterly derailed within the first 2 or 3 game sessions. I actually played in a campaign run by one of my best friends, Alan, and in the very first campaign, we so egregiously screwed up his entire storyline that he just shit-canned it. Pardon my French.
Oh,
he
no.
literally was I have no idea how to do this, so we're just going to start over again. Sorry.
We had a one of the memorable game sessions that we had, kind of the same idea, but I think we made it about an hour into the game session, and somebody just did something so weird, and I mean, just, there was no reason for it to happen. And when they did it, it completely killed, like, the whole precipice to the story. So my buddy was like, okay, so, you know, but he's the type of person, like I said, that would come up with something really good. So he basically made a whole campaign from scratch in his head right then and there. And it took him a couple hours to kind of just, of us, you know, wandering around doing much of nothing and attacking the darkness. But outside of that, we, you know, it ended up working to be like one of the funnest campaigns we ever ran.
It definitely, you know, if you're willing to think outside the box and be flexible, it can be amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely a very fun experience. Now, so you know, and I meant to mention this before, but you kind of took a very non-traditional route to being a published author.
Yeah, big time.
So what was the whole, you know, you said you started out basically as like a live journal, live blog type deal, and that was, so how did they go about contacting you? Was that something you submitted, or was it something they actually came at you about doing?
A little bit of both. I had been writing for a while, you know, I had the bulk of what became the 8 books written, and I was reached out to by a best-selling author by the name of John Ringo. And John Ringo's big in the sci-fi community, and he was getting ready to write his Black Tide series, which was post-apocalyptic zombie stuff, which is what I was writing at the time. And John wrote me on my website and said, hey, I just got done reading everything on your website. It's really good. What are you going to do with it? And of course, I hadn't heard of Ringo, you know, at the time. I had never read any of his books. So I'm Googling him, and he's a legitimate author. And I said, all right, well, let's see what happens. And I wrote him back, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing with it. I'm just kind of writing it for fun, and the blog is pretty cool, and I'm making some money on ads, and I had like a subscription system where people could pay money to get the posts early. So I was making a little bit of money on the side, enough to, you know, kind of say that I was making money. But he wrote me back and said, hey, well, if you don't have a plan for it, I suggest you try and get it published. I'm going to put you in touch with my editor. And he forwarded my email along to his editor. They read a bunch of stuff on the website, and the next thing you know, we're talking, you know, how many books and how they're going to work and when we're going to release them, and that's what happened.
That's got to be a really cool feeling, you know, just that whole process.
Yeah, surreal.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm the type of person that if somebody approached me like that, I'd be like, all right, really, like, why are you screwing with me? What did I do? You know, that's just my attitude.
That was the first thing I thought.
All right, which one of my friends is messing with me right now? You know, that sort of thing. That's how I think. I don't, you know, I would be very taken aback.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt.
So, now you were mentioning to me, we were talking a little bit before we started, that you have, you know, you've got some audiobook stuff as well going on?
Yeah, everything I write goes to audiobook. Originally, I did a lot of the independent platform audio stuff through ACX, finding narrators for the different works. But since then, I've become an Audible Studios author. They now contract for almost everything that I write. So that's pretty cool. That's really nice because it's you know, a large traditional publisher putting out audiobooks, which is a hugely growing industry, and I get them to promote my work. And I just had the third book in my urban fantasy series just came out last week on the 19th, which is really exciting. Now,
generally with your audiobooks, how long is like a typical book in audio format?
For me, the vast majority of my books are, you know, it depends on the speed of the narrator. Some speak slower, some speak faster, but most of them come in between 9 and 11 hours. I've got some big ones that are like 13 hours, 14 hours, and then I've got a couple of small ones that are like 7, 8.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I would say they're probably about 10 hours consistently.
I like the whole audiobook concept. I've never been big into the audiobooks myself personally, but as someone who commutes, almost an hour each way to work, I can definitely see the appeal, because where time is so limited, and between working my full-time job and traveling and having the podcast and writing and different things that are going on, it makes it hard. Honestly, I have a really hard time finding free time to just sit down and read nowadays. And I know, one of the big things you always hear as an author is, if you want to be a better author, you need to read more. Well, when you're trying to juggle schedules, now, I don't know, I'm interested to hear from somebody that does writing full time. Do you find it easier to read more?
No.
No?
I think part of that is because we have 2 little ones.
Yeah.
We have 2 under 2, so
wow.
all of our free time is basically cleaning the house, cleaning them up, and managing, the little disasters that 2 little human beings are as they move through life.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really hopeful that in a couple of years, when they start to become a little bit more autonomous and trustable, I'll have time to read. Right now, I have to bite, fight, scratch, and kick for my wife and I to find time to work, let alone, read and enjoy hobbies. Like, I get my game day once a month, and that's about it.
Yeah, my buddies and I, a lot of my old gamer buddies, instead of doing like D&D and Shadowrun and stuff, we get together and do like old school LAN parties like once a month, where we, do some online gaming, do some like, Company of Heroes and Age of Empires and whatever else we're playing. But if we can do that once a month, we're lucky, because just trying to finagle schedules is a nightmare most of the time, so.
Seriously.
We've been going back and forth now on a date for our next get-together for like 3 days, trying to find a date we can all do it. So, that is life, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd say it's sad, but it's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah. With the 2 little ones, I'm throwing the idea at you, dystopian children's books. It's a whole new genre, But like happy dystopian children's books, if that would be even possible. But, hey.
Seriously.
So, what are, what are the upcoming plans as far as your writing and stuff goes? Really? Like immediate future.
I have a big year. The next 6 or 7 months is slated with a ton of stuff. I have had a lot of things in post-development that are all kind of coming together at the same time. So the 8-book post-apocalyptic series, Adrian's Undead Diary, I have 4 more books in process for that. 2 of them are written, 2 of them will be written. The 2 that are written, The Dealer of Hope and The Last Resort, will be coming out by year's end. Then I have a young adult science fiction dystopian novel, my first in a trilogy, also my first young adult work, that will probably be coming out, if I'm lucky, in August, probably not until September though. Then I also have the 4th book of the Reemergence series, my urban fantasy series, is in process right now, and the manuscript for that is due to Audible for recording sometime in the next 10 or 15 days, so I actually have to finish writing it. And that'll be out by year's end. It's just been a crazy busy year. I'm super excited though. Having all these pieces coming out, in a short period of time is great, because it gives me a little bit of breathing room, and I don't have to work, 8, 9, 10 hours a day just to, kind of stay caught up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a lot of material for that short of a time period, really. I don't know if most readers and people in general get how long it takes to write a novel, and the time and editing process and everything. Because I have people, trying to find time to write for me, I know personally, if I'm lucky and I'm able to do it, it takes me 6 months to, put out a book. That's if I have get the time to actually sit down for an hour or two every day and write.
Right. Well, full time, right? I still have to write the same word count, right?
Right.
So a novel is 80 to 120,000 words, and some are smaller, 60 or so. But on a good day, the average writer might crank out 2,000 or 3,000 words, and that's on a full day of writing, right? So even if it goes perfectly and you work consecutively and you're writing an 80,000 word book, it's still going to take you a minimum of 40 consecutive days just to write it. Never mind going back and editing it, fixing the continuity errors, fixing all your plot bunnies, and then you send it off to be edited, which is 2 weeks to a month, if not more. And then you get it back and you have to go through all the edits, which can take a week or two. And then you go off to, actually releasing the thing. So like in a perfect world, you're looking at a minimum of 3 months to put out a book. And that's if you write like a demon and everything goes perfectly.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about part-time, or you're actually talking about the rate at which you can, really write a book, it's 4 months, 5 months, 6 months.
I think that's part of the reason, like, writing short stories has been so attractive to me lately, because I have, 5 or 6 novels that I've started and just either abandoned because I wasn't in the right frame of mind to write them. Not that I didn't necessarily like the idea, but either what I was writing I wasn't feeling at the time, or I just, whatever, so I kind of put them on the back burner. But I found, especially lately with my scheduling and stuff, I can bang out a short story in a couple days. And then I have time to edit. Right now I'm sitting on about 6 or 7 short stories that either, some of them are completely done and some of them I need to do some edits on and flesh out a little bit. But I think I know personally for me, it's just, I'm finding it easier to be creative in shorter bursts like that than actually trying to do like the whole novella or novel thing.
Oh, I totally get that. I really like the idea of short stories, because you're in, you express your idea, and then you're out. You don't have to worry about, lengthy character arcs or continuity beyond the small investment. Yeah. So, short stories are where it's at.
The biggest issue I find with short stories coming from writing, because I really didn't write a lot of short stories up until a few years ago, where I really started focusing on writing more short stories, was the fact sometimes I have novel ideas that I try to turn into short stories, and usually those are the ones when I send them out for like an anthology submission or something, I usually sometimes get the feedback of, this needs to be a novel, there's way too much in this for a short story, type deal. But it's a weird balancing act. They're kind of two different animals that you have to approach differently.
Yeah. I also got into the novella business, like the 15 to 30,000 word kind of releases, and I wrote 3 of them the last few years to kind of explore ideas and scenes that couldn't support a full novel, but were way bigger than a short story. And as a writer, they're super satisfying.
Oh, they're fun.
Because you get to get in, do the business that you wanted to do without having to worry about tying in all these bigger ideas or stretching the story out longer than it needs to be.
Yeah. The New England Speculative Writers Association, when I submitted my short story for this year's their first anthology, which I didn't get in, but hey, I got some great feedback on that. And that was,
they gave great feedback.
And I was very, very impressed with that out of anything. I've submitted to a number of anthologies, and usually you get a, sorry, we've decided to pass on your story type thing most of the time. 9 out of 10 times. Once in a while you'll get some feedback. But it was really nice to get the feedback from them, but one of the things that they said was, this is an awesome story, but it needs to be either a novel or a novella at least, because there's way too much. I want to know more. I want to know more about this world and these characters, and there's just so much more that can be done with it. A short story isn't the proper format.
And that's good feedback.
I like that feedback. So that's one of the ones that I am going on vacation in 2 more days. I have 12 days off, and I'm not going anywhere other than a few little, day trip type things. And that's one of my things that I really want to do is sit down and start working on that story and adding to it and, building, because I think that's going to be my lead story for my short story collection. Because when I put out a short story collection, I generally like to have a novella and then 4 or 5 accompanying short stories. Is how I've been putting the 2 that I've put out so far. And I know from a personal standpoint, my short stories have been more successful than my novels for the most part. I got a film developed out of one of those short stories, and
that's awesome.
And I have a few more that people have talked to me about developing and whatever. So I think I feel like I've kind of found my niche there with those right now, and I'm hoping maybe that as that expands and more things happen with those, it will expand into people taking more of a chance on my novels. And personally as an indie author, getting exposure is so hard without somebody financially backing you. It's very difficult.
Yeah, you gotta. I mean, it's one thing to write a really good book. It's another thing for people to be able to discover it. It's not about how good a writer you are when you're an indie necessarily. It's about whether or not you can get your book put in front of people.
Yeah,
because if they can't find it, they won't buy it.
Oh, very much so. I just did an event this past weekend and was selling books at it, and and a lot of people that come up to me, it's like, well, I've never heard of you before. Can you tell me a little bit about you? I see you've got several books out, and you go through the whole spiel of telling, and a lot of them bought 2 or 3 of my books, and they were like, if I like these, I will go, where can I find these? So I give them my card with, my address so they can get them on Amazon or wherever. But that to me is one of the only ways, without spending a ton of money out of pocket, that you're able to engage with people and get them interested, and hopefully if they like your stuff, they'll tell other people and so forth and so forth. So
yep,
that definitely, that's definitely got to be, I guess, one of the things that's definitely a positive. I would think would be a positive, of working with a publisher, is having kind of a little bit of that weight taken off your shoulders as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, you? Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying it's definitely a struggle.
Now, do you do Comic-Cons or events like that? Is that something you try to do at all?
Yeah, I previously have described myself as a convention whore. When I worked in gaming, I got to do all the big gaming conventions every year, on the company. So I got the taste for it back in the, late 90s. And now as a writer, I go as a vendor and, I'm pitching books, and every once in a while I get to go as a guest because, the convention runners are fans or whatever, and I get to do panels, and it's a lot of fun. But, like I said, we got 2 kids now, and we have to be very, very selective with what conventions we do. They are very expensive. Booth fees and hotel rooms and food and ordering merchandise to bring it. I mean, I've spent $5,000 on a single convention. And then, you want to do some of the small ones too, where, a table's $50, your local library kind of thing. But, we have to be very mindful of, how long a trip, how long a drive. So this year, in 2018, I did an event in Philadelphia for charity. I've done a couple of local, bookstore, comic store signings, and we're doing Scares That Care down in Virginia, the first week in August, which is another charity event. We did that one last year, and it was a lot of fun. Big indie author crowd at that convention, so it's very fun.
I've heard a lot of indie authors talking about Scares That Care, and a lot of them putting books up that all the sales from this month or whatever are going to Scares That Care or whatever, type things, which I think is very cool when you can give back that way, through your work.
Brian Keene's big.
Speaking of Brian Keene, I haven't heard any updates on him.
Yeah, he's healing. I met him at Scares That Care last year. We're acquaintances. I wouldn't call us friends, but he got burned in a brush fire in his yard, real bad. I heard his elbow fell off the other day, but that was a good thing, I guess. But yeah, he is the guy who sort of coordinates all the author stuff for Scares That Care. And was able to organize a bunch of really good panels, and he does his, telethon for Scares That Care every year. I think he raised $20,000 again this year.
Wow.
And all the money goes to the people that the charity supports. They pick a handful of people, and all the money goes to them. It's not just like anonymously siphoned out. You actually get to see the people that are going to get the money, which is really nice.
Oh, that's very cool. If anybody listening wants to donate to Brian's recovery fund, I believe his GoFundMe page is still up. Somebody had set it up for him to help with medical expenses because he is facing. His medical expenses have got to be insane with what he's dealing with. So, if you're interested, go on GoFundMe and search for Brian Keene, and it should come right up. I will try to include a link to it in my show description for anybody that's curious and wants to go check out the show description. I'm going to try to find the link and post that in there. So if you want to donate, it would be, I'm sure Brian and his family would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, he's facing a pretty stiff uphill financial battle. Never mind just healing. Which is really what he needs to focus on. Because
he suffered a lot of third and second degree burns over quite a large portion of his body, correct?
Yeah, left arm and head and face, I believe.
Yeah. So there's let's everybody send some good vibes out to Brian, and hopefully he has as speedy of a recovery and complete of a recovery as he can have.
Absolutely.
So, I always like to talk a little bit about movies on the podcast. So, what are some films you're currently into right now? Or some of your all-time favorites even, whatever you want to chat about. I'm good with anything, pretty much.
I'm all over the place. I watch everything. As a guy who writes or is known for writing in the zombie genre, I definitely make sure I'm caught up with all the new releases on that. Haven't watched anything new in the genre. I just put Cargo in my Netflix queue, which I'm excited to watch.
I've heard very mixed reviews about that. I watched it myself a couple weeks ago, and personally, I enjoyed the hell out of it. It's a very different take on things, but it's interesting enough. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it does enough different, and what it has to say is different. So it's kind of an interesting, it makes it an interesting concept.
I'm excited to watch it. I forget the guy's name, Martin Freeman. Martin Freeman, I adore. I haven't seen a bad movie with him in it. So, I'm really looking forward to it. I like it when they take the genre and they add a little twist to it or try and show you a different thing.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
The zombie subgenre in itself, I think, is at kind of a weird point right now where it has been done to death, but there are certain properties that have good followings, that people follow. But it's really hard to break into the genre with anything new, I guess, because it's so saturated. I know
it's like vampire, urban fantasy, paranormal romance stuff. Yeah, after the wave of Twilight. It's just everyone's doing it. Everyone's got their take on it. Everyone's, doing the love story. And it just, it petered out and died. And I'm sure, the zombie genre will too in time.
The zombies, much like zombies themselves, always seem to come back. So, I know my first novel that I released was a zombie novel. And at the time, this was when Walking Dead was really just getting going, and by the time I finished writing the novel, I was like, holy crap, they basically just took my story idea. It was very similar, even though I wrote it before I knew anything about that whole season of The Walking Dead, the show, not the comic series, but, it's just, so it's trying to stay ahead of the curve a little bit when you're trying to break in and know what's going on. But there's a great series that I love called the Dead Hunger series.
Mm-hmm. Eric Shawman's.
I blew through this. Like every time a new book comes out, bought it, read it, loved it.
Eric's a good guy. He's a buddy of mine.
Oh, very cool. I started reading Scabs, but I'm still on the first book, and I just haven't had time to finish it yet. But
I really liked Scabs. I thought it was good.
So I'm interested to see where he goes. I like his writing style, so I don't think I'll have a problem, blowing right through that when I get a chance to actually sit down and read it. So, have you seen A Girl with All the Gifts?
I have. I really liked it. I loved the book. The movie is different enough that it kind of stands on its own. I love the, spoiler alert, I love the idea that it was a fungal infection. The cordyceps kind of idea. But it was really, really well done, I thought.
Yeah, it's a very, it's different, exactly like you were saying, I wasn't sure really what to think of it. I kind of held off on watching it because I was like, I don't know, is this going to be like a drama movie, or is this like with zombies, or is it what is it? But it had a good enough balance of stuff that it kind of worked for me, and I really, really ended up liking it a lot.
Yeah, I love the idea. It does not have a particularly happy ending.
No, it's very bleak.
I appreciate. I think, a book that can end with sort of a brutal take on how things can go. I like that. Bleak, yeah, but realistic.
Oh, exactly. There's always a fine line, I think, between the over-the-top, saturated, happy ending or the overly bleak ending. It's when you can find that sweet spot right in the middle that, okay, that's kind of a bummer, but it's realistic, but not so... There's maybe some hope still there somewhere,
Right. Well, Hollywood had this infatuation with movies that had ugly endings. It was post-Saw torture porn era.
Yeah.
And there was I couldn't tell you the titles off the top of my head, but there was probably 6-8 horror movies that all just had awful endings. Bleak, dark. And in a way, I really appreciate that, because it's like, a lot of the stories had just really brutal endings. And, we watch movies to escape from reality, and, when the world gets to be a pretty dark place, we would like to have, kind of a happy ending every once in a while.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of unhappy endings going on right now in the real world.
Oh, very much so. I always gravitated towards Italian cinema a lot, and a lot of the older Italian cinema, especially a lot of Fulci stuff.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
It's very bleak in their endings. There's not a lot of hope in those endings of, especially the Beyond and Gates of Hell and even Zombie. They're bleak, but they fit the tone of those films. I think it's all about tone, really, with your film. If you present a very happy, cheerful film all the way through and then have this ultra dark, kind of bleak ending, that doesn't fit, and I hate it. But if the tone of your film is pretty dark and bleak, the bleak ending doesn't affect me quite so much. And, I appreciate it more and I can kind of roll with it. I don't know. It's just one of those things. I think a lot of it's personal preference, like anything, but...
Yeah, it definitely... I've watched a lot of films that had dark endings or bleak endings, and walked away and said, wow, that was a great movie. They really nailed that story. And vice versa. I've had some where it was like, really? Seriously? That's it? Or it's such an abrupt change that it just didn't fit.
Sometimes it just seems like they're doing it to be mean-spirited and just throwing it in there because it's like either A, they couldn't think of an ending, or they, they were like, no, we just kind of they almost want to piss the audience off at the end to get them riled up and stir some sort of emotion out of them as a final, as the final curtain call type deal. All right, so if everybody's listening to the show is probably telling I am having some internet issues on my end, so the audio might be a little squirrely here and there. So, but we're getting close to that time at the end of the show anyway. So I want to thank Chris for coming on the show and hanging out and chatting. I will definitely have him back on when I get my internet issues straightened around a little bit so we can have a little more cohesive conversation about things. And before we go, Chris, can you tell everybody where they can find your work and where to check you out online and all that good stuff?
I would be delighted. I am available on almost every social media platform as Philbrook Author, and that's Philbrook, Philbrook. So Facebook, Twitter, all that jazz. And then if you're looking for my online my home website where you can sign up for my newsletter, it's thechrisphilbrook.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much, like I said, for coming on. Sorry about the internet issues and cutting in and out and trying to piece this all together. I appreciate it. Like I said, I definitely will have you back on. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to the show and bearing with us through this today. And please check out my sponsors, the Maine Cannababes. Go to www.mainecannababes.com to check out all the cool events they are doing and what they are all about. There's lots of good information on there. You can find Average Joe's Drive-In on all the usual places. And I just want to leave you guys with one last word of advice. Remember, kids, opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one, and I will see you all on the flip side.
It's intermission. Rise and stretch time. Time to refresh yourself and visit our snack bar. Got a yen for hot popcorn? Your favorite soft drinks are sparkling cold. The juicy Frank sizzling hot. There's delicious coffee, freshly brewed, and all kinds of ice cream and candy to tempt you. Showtime will be announced loud and clear to get you back to your car in time. So stretch your legs. Come to the snack bar now.
Thanks for listening to Average Joe's Drive-In. If you'd like to talk movies or contact the show, add our social media pages. You can add us on Facebook at Average Joe's Drive-In Podcast, on Twitter at TWJ Author, on Instagram at Thomas Washburn Jr. You can also hit up www.thomaswashburnjr.com for more information about the show and related links. If you'd like to support the show, you can buy TJ's books on Amazon. Just type in Thomas Washburn Jr. in the search. Books are available in Kindle and paperback formats. If you have Kindle Unlimited or Prime, you can read the books for free and money will be earned by the pages read. It doesn't cost you anything and it supports the show. Until next time, you've been listening to Average Joe's Drive-In.